Hello and welcome to the WrestleTalk News. I am Luke Owen and this is Wrestling News. And we kick things off today with a report from Fightful Select, who report that former WWE wrestler EJ Nduka has signed with All Elite Wrestling. But not only that, he's been signed for a while. Fightful Select report that Nduka has been signed with AEW since his debut in January. However, it wasn't just AEW that had interest in signing him, as companies in Mexico and Japan had interest in bringing him in, and even WWE were reportedly looking to bring him back after releasing him in 2021. He has since wrestled for MLW before becoming a free agent earlier this year. Fightful add that the firing of James Kimball from WWE, who was released over a HR violation in February, meant that WWE's pursuit of bringing Nduka back weren't followed up on. Perhaps he can make his second debut for the company on the first episode of Collision, which debuts this Saturday. Yeah, I know, I keep forgetting about it as well. Over on the WrestleTalk podcast channel, myself and Ollie Davis will be doing live reactions for the debut episode with a full podcast review of the show as soon as it's finished. So head on over there and subscribe and enable notifications to always on to know when we go live. The show will have the AEW returns of the likes of Miro, Andrade El Idolo, and CM Punk, who will team with FTR to take on Samoa Joe and Bullet Club Gold. But Collision was a show that got off to a rocky start and is still on rocky ground. Despite being a big announcement for AEW at the Warner Upfront, there was supposed to be more announcements about the return of CM Punk, but there was reportedly more issues between Punk and AEW, specifically over the rehiring of Ace Steel. And it meant that Tony Khan could not announce the return of one of his biggest draws or the location of the first episode, which has since been revealed as the United Center in Chicago. These issues were resolved, the United Center was announced, Punk was announced, and that show is doing quite well with its ticket sales, which is more than could be said for some of the other Collision tapings. Around 8,500 tickets have been sold for the Chicago episode of Collision, but Canada is a totally different story. Under 2,000 tickets have been distributed for the second episode in Toronto, while less than 900 tickets have been distributed for the third episode in Hamilton. One theory as to why these locations are struggling is that AEW are also running Dynamite, a Rampage, and Forbidden Door in effectively the same market. Ticket sales in Alberta, New Jersey, and the Carolinas are faring much better. But another theory is that people do not know what they're going to get with Collision. And part of that problem is the persistent rumors and reports that AEW are either getting a hard brand split, a soft brand split, or even a soft-boiled combination of the two. And Tony Khan isn't offering up any clear answers himself. Being interviewed on Barstool Wrestling with Knock Knock, Who's There, Brandon Walker, Khan said of the roster split, "I'm going to feature certain talent on certain shows, but I haven't drawn any hard lines or locked us into any kind of a split of a roster." Khan says this will let them showcase certain wrestlers and certain storylines, and even suggests that audiences will be left in suspense over which wrestlers and storylines will be on the show that they bought tickets for, which he thinks is a good idea. Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer noted that the roster split changes every day and will continue to change until the show is on the air. He adds that the final decision will be made once it becomes apparent if Collision is a success or is struggling. And speaking of changes until the show is on the air, Fightful Select is reporting that the commentary team for the show has yet to be decided. So you're telling me there's a chance? Are you excited for AEW Collision? Sound off in the comments down below. But if you think that AEW is the only wrestling company with issues backstage, well, there's always WWE. Because this week's edition of Raw saw one of my favorite things take place in Chad Gable versus Eric, where Maxine, following her coach's advice, executed a perfect arm drag on the attacking Valhalla. It was awesome, hilarious, and the best thing in WWE right now. Yeah, you heard me, Roman. But according to BWE, it was supposed to run longer. The Twitter account claimed that the match was cut short to allow for a backstage segment between Finn Balor and JD McDonough to take place, which was there to sow more dissension in Judgment Day and the growing rift between Balor and Damian Priest. What's perhaps more interesting for, well, at least for wrestling news YouTube channels like us anyway, is that the segment had been removed by Vince McMahon, who was making changes to the show remotely, and then put back in by Triple H, who was there in the building for the show. While Vince was at Raw last week to make changes and was sitting in gorilla position, that was only because the show was close to WWE's HQ in Hartford, Connecticut. With the show back on the road, Vince was just making his changes and suggestions remotely, which Fightful Select report is something the talent much prefers than him actually being backstage. Reportedly, most of his changes are just timing and match order ones, or what happens in the aftermath of matches. This is now the second story in as many days where Vince and Trips have gone in different directions on creative ideas. It was reported via Fightful Select that Vince McMahon wanted to tone down the flamboyance of maximum male models, but Triple H encouraged them to be more flamboyant. It should be noted that it was only a few weeks ago that there were reports that WWE were high on the duo of Mansoor and Marseille, but their appearances have been greatly scaled back. And Fightful Select reported yesterday that the duo may be repackaged completely. On his Backstage Report podcast on Fightful Select, Sean Ross Sapp noted that he hasn't been posting the rundowns of Raw as of late, as many things are changing up until the last minute, and even noted in a separate Patreon post that they're not going to report on Vince-made changes unless it's something major, because it's now simply the standard at this point. In a little bit of surprising news, PW Insider are reporting that Kathy Carino, aka Allison Danger, was spotted backstage at the Performance Center. Now, the reason this is a surprising news item is that Carino, who's the sister of fellow WWE coach Steve Carino, was released by WWE on January 5th, 2022, just 3 months after signing with the company full-time. She told Renee Paquette on the sessions that she uprooted her life from the Carolinas to take the WWE gig in Florida, and the firing left her in financial ruin as she had to take on a second property for the job. It is unknown at this point if Danger will be offered another full-time gig, as this is reportedly just a guest coach spot at this point. Speaking of PW Insider, and here's a little gem for you. The site speculates, underline that word there, speculates that WWE might be done with doing matches on the kickoff show. This is quite the speculation, as WWE have not done a match on the kickoff show for, checks notes, pretty much a full year. F***ing hell, lads, don't use the jump to conclusions about too much. The speculation train's running wild. But maybe I'm being harsh, as according to BWE, there are still a few more matches to be announced for Money in the Bank next month. Currently, we have 2 ladder matches with Santos Escobar, LA Knight, Ricochet, Shinsuke Nakamura, Butch and Damian Priest in the men's match, and currently Io Sky, Zelina Vega, Becky Lynch, Zoe Stark and Bayley in the women's match. There are 2 singles matches announced, with Cody Rhodes taking on Dominic Mysterio and Finn Balor challenging Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. At least I think he challenged him. I couldn't quite hear what he was saying over the Raw crowd singing Seth's theme song. According to BWE, there are 3 more matches to be announced, one of which could be the rumor tag match with Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa versus the Usos. Matt Riddle versus Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship has been teased on Raw, and there's a 5-team gauntlet set for SmackDown this Friday to crown new #1 contenders for Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn's tag titles, though it hasn't been announced if that tag title match will happen at Money in the Bank. As for the women's titles, Asuka's defending her women's championship against Charlotte Flair the night before Money in the Bank. The women's tag title unification match takes place on June 23rd, and there haven't been any challenges set up for Rhea Ripley's Women's World Championship. So the Bloodline Tag, the IC match, and the tag titles are likely the other 3 matches to round out this card. I wonder if one of those will be on the pre-show, hey PW Insider? And quickly on Money in the Bank, and currently the betting odds have LA Knight as the firm favorite to win the briefcase according to Bet Online, though Damian Priest is a current dark horse contender. And that means it is time for my NXT 1 minute, 1 take review. So let's take a look at last night's NXT. There's a lot happened, so I've got to try and get through this in just 1 minute. Let me get my timer set up here. Right, so I've got 1 minute on the clock. Right, I've been really good at this as of late, haven't I? I've been dead good at this, so here we go. I'm feeling really confident this week. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Wesley and Tyler Bate and Mustafa Ali beat Schism because grizzled young vets cannot get released, and Ali later made himself the special referee for Bate and Lee's title match. Seth Rollins didn't actually make his way to the NXT arena and instead accepted Bron Breakker's open challenge for the World Heavyweight Championship via video for next week, one day after doing a different open challenge on Raw. Bron better hope that Rollins retains, I guess. Ilya Dragunov was also in this segment. I've already lost my place. Where am I? Despite being drafted to Raw, Dana Brooke said she could wrestle on any show. Why do we even bother caring at this point? Set up a feud with Cora Jade. Thea Hill then beat Cora Jade after some Dana Brooke interference. Shawn Michaels announced NXT Gold Rush. Nathan Frazier won the Heritage Cup 2-1, and Von Wagner said he's had a breakthrough in his therapy. I don't know how much time I've got. Axiom, 20 seconds. Axiom and Script beat Yabba Dabba Kato and then attacked by Los Lotharios, and Stacks did some Naked Gun style skits from sometime 94 looking for who ratted out Tony D'Angelo. Malik Blade and Edris Inafei. Malik Blade beat Edris Inafei, and Blair Davenport explained why she attacked women. Roxanne Perez then beat Tatum Paxton and said she's now hunted for Blair Davenport. We've got a vignette for a new bunch of people. And the main event saw Baron Corbin beat Ilya Dragunov, which sounds like I'm making it up, but I'm not. And then he's going to face Carmelo Hayes for the NXT title at Gold Rush. Nailed it. Nailed it. Thank you very much, everyone. Here's yesterday's news. WrestleTalk.